Hi, and welcome to the NAXSA podcast. I am James McRae, Communication Committee Chairman for NAXSA. I'm excited to bring you an extended two-part conversation with two titans of the trench safety and shoring industry. But first, what is NAXSA? NAXSA stands for the North American Excavation Shoring Association. The industry organization was created to promote the safe use of trench shoring equipment and excavation safety practices. NAXSA includes shoring manufacturers, engineers, and shoring rental and distribution companies. All these groups share the common goal of zero deaths and injuries due to trench cave-ins and other excavation safety issues. Back to those titans of excavation shoring and safety. Our first guest is David V. Dow. David is a 30-year veteran of the shoring industry and was a founding member of NAXSA when he co-owned and operated Trench Safety and Supply equipment rental. Reaching back even further than shoring, David has amassed almost 50 years of service overall in the general construction industry. Thank you, David, for joining us. Our second guest is Wendell Wood. Wendell is also a 40-plus year veteran of the shoring industry and was also a member of NAXSA from the association's inception. He is currently owner of MMJ Services, which specializes in trench safety training and consultation. Here's the first half of our conversation with David and Wendell.
David, let me start with you. And then first question, how have you witnessed shoring solve a problem in the field? What was the problem? What was the shoring solution?
Well, one of the reasons I got involved in the shoring and shielding industry was I felt that shoring distributors had a great opportunity to provide value for contractors and utilities, and it was through problem solving. You think about rentals, a lot of your rentals are pretty straightforward. The contractor knows what he wants and calls you up and he says he needs an 8x16 steel shield with 36-inch spreaders. He needs it, delivered to a certain address, and it's all pretty straightforward. But you get a fair number of calls where the contractor is sometimes in a state of panic. Maybe he's in a busy downtown area. He's tying into an existing utility. The utility is not where they thought it was supposed to be. It's a lot deeper. Soil's not as good. Surface encumbrances everywhere, traffic, and the contractor in his mind had planned to do the job one particular way and suddenly discovers that's not going to work. And shoring and shielding industry, well, again, it's a huge opportunity to step in and help that contractor solve a problem. And a lot of times there are multiple options, and it's just a question of figuring out what is the best option for the specifics of that excavation.
Wendell, how about you? What have you seen in the field where shoring has solved a problem?
Well, I go back not quite to day one by any means, but certainly the problem that we had there in the 70s was that earth collapses. And if you're going to put in a water system or a sewer system, you got to deal with the fact that earth is going. So the hazard, Mother Nature collapsing, was really the first and foremost big problem that we had. And while Nixon signed in the OSH Act, which created a whole new bureaucracy with regard to employee safety, he also signed in the EPA. Now, that was executive order, but that created a whole industry of cities and municipalities and everything not being able to actually allow people to put in drain lines and everything. Like I think once David was telling me that Memphis is special in a way that he was very successful there. Others were not, because many of the rural areas around his area did not have to put in or tie into water and sewer lines. And so even though their population was growing, everything, the opportunity was not as great. Training, I think he used to bring in a lot of business, but I'll let him comment on that. But no, the problems that we had was, the ground was collapsing. You got 3 manufacturers of shoring in Michigan, lakes everywhere, bad ground, and actually the founder of EPI, Terry Forsberg, recognized that. Putting in sewer, especially, you couldn't go very far, 3 or 4 feet deep, and it was collapsing on you. And so boxes became for cut and cover. Just simply became the way to get that kind of work done. And actually, Jim Griswold of Griswold Machine and Engineering made him his first boxes. So at one time, we could say GMA made more boxes than EPI, but EPI sold more boxes than GMA. And then later they made a real separation, and then Frank Balloff with Protec came into the picture as well. But we had just simply had bad ground, and that was the problem, was to be solved. And when the standard came out, repair and maintenance pits began to get into it. Large area shoring began to come a necessity rather than just simply small area shoring or just simply cut and cover. Repair and maintenance became a big issue for the distributors and everything. So we've seen a lot, and like Dave was saying, yeah, we've had contractors come with special problems from time to time, and long pipe created us for a short time making 50-foot long boxes, and then people got out of the idea that bigger was greater, and longer was maybe the best way to go. And so other ways of handling that thing. The matter of mixing systems, we had to get into that. One time we were just simply steel, trench shields and things like that. Then eventually we got into the hydraulics, and then we brought in the modular aluminum shoring, mega braces, slide rails. It's been exciting to watch the expansion, and the expansion has not ended. We do have some of our friends in the north that are finding some success here in the United States with their products, which is it's going to be very interesting to see how that works out. But they're solving a problem that we were not able to solve too well, and that is, how do you put these big boxes together without people getting hurt, their fingers smashed or their toes smashed, and so there's some excitement yet to come in this industry.
Yeah, it's amazing that even as even as the industry has grown, it's still evolving.
A lot of options. There's no one absolutely right way to do things. Obviously, the right way is to be safe, but a lot of times there's more than one way to be safe, and there's just a plethora of options today that certainly didn't exist 30 or 40 years ago.
Exactly.
So I know you guys have seen so much out in the field, and some of it good, some bad. What about those contractors that are conscious of trench safety? They've given an A for effort and all that they've trying to do, but the execution just isn't what it needs to be. I remember seeing a photo that there was a trench shield in a trench, and there was no spreader pipes between the two sidewalls. Two sidewalls were just leaning back against the trench. That's just one example. I'm sure you both seen something similar. What do you think, Wendell? What's some A for efforts and F for execution?
Well, one of the greatest problems that we have, and I think is still very much a problem, is the driving of sheeting around boxes, not only to extend its ability to go deep, but also putting steel sheeting in front of the box in an effort to make it longer. And all of that just simply changes the whole engineering dynamics of the shield. So yeah, I see what he's doing. I know what he wants to do, but instead of getting a stacker working well with that. He violates the engineering principles of the shield by driving this sheeting. Now, we did have one contractor, I remember working with him on several occasions, and we actually developed a special shield for that kind of purposes. And then later on, we introduced the steel sheeting frame box, which helps in some ways. So there's new products out there, but I think driving steel plates along, down and below the box really changes the dynamics. Leaving out spreaders, not an uncommon thing. We've seen that effort done many times. Using a shield instead of in a trench, but in an excavation to hold up a wall without then any opposing dirt on the other side or controlling the lateral movement that could take place with the thing. So you got to give contractors a lot of sense. Many of the things, the developments that we brought into shields came from contractors, but contractors in their creative efforts sometimes go beyond common sense and the norm in an effort to get things done. And you introduced maybe a question earlier, what have we seen different? And that's going to be a huge thing. And that is, it was all about productivity. I would have to say in the last 20 years, I could easily say without question, it's now safety and productivity are the norms around which most contractors are thinking. They want to get it done, but they want to get it done safely. And that's huge compared to what I saw back in the late 70s, 80s, and early 90s.
Yeah, people, I should say contractors are out there. They got the steel road plates and hey, this is just like a sidewall of a trench shield. Let's see if we can implement this as much as possible. Um, and they don't realize that that's not damaging the trench shield. It is voiding the tabulated data correctly for the trench shield. How about you, David? What have you seen out there that you gave the contractor an A for effort, but there was still some things that made the trench more unsafe than safe?
Well, if you spend any amount of time in the field, you'll see all different types of situations. There's no question you see some situations where the contractor's trying to do something, but he's actually doing something that's very dangerous. And in those situations, generally the contractors are pretty receptive. If you have some credibility and you pick and choose your right words and tactfully point out that what he's doing is actually dangerous, and suggest maybe an alternative, you can make some progress with those types of contractors. The more challenging situation is the contractor that has the opposite attitude. He doesn't give a blankety blank for safety, and he's doing it wrong, and that's a more challenging situation. Again, in that first situation, the contractor wants to do the right thing, and it's just a question of how you approach him, and a lot of times he'll be receptive. But the flip side, or the opposite situation, those situations are challenging. Did I answer your question, James?
You did. You absolutely did. And sort of related, and I know this was a thought you had, David, with the bigger projects in the major markets, the compliance is going to be high. So they're going to do the best they can. However, the job may not be perfectly shored, but the contractor needs and tries to make it close.
Right. Sure.
In terms of trench safety, is almost perfect. Is that still better than nothing?
Absolutely. In my opinion, Wendell may disagree.
I know, I agree with that.
There's no perfect trench. I'm not certain how you would define perfect. But they're always but again, there's no perfect trench, but I guess there is. But you can get 3 or 4 people that are very experienced with shoring and shielding, and they may have a slightly different view of that particular trench. And at the end of the day, their approaches to solving a problem may all be safe. It's just slightly different approaches or slightly different viewpoints. So again, I'm not certain a perfect shoring system. I guess there's a textbook example somewhere of a perfect job site, but in reality, they're I'm not going to say they're rare, but there are always going to be some minor things that you or I might do differently if it was our job. On your bigger projects, in my experience, and I have a bad habit, I still stop at job sites. You know, I carry a vest in my car. I carry a hard hat. On your bigger projects, if there's a problem, it's not an act of commission. It's just omission. They just made a mistake, or they were confused, or it's an oversight. Their policies and their hearts are in the right place, and they're going to want to do it right.
Wendell,
Yeah.
I would concur with that. I mean, spacing on hydraulics is very critical, but I don't get too excited if the guy has them at 9 feet apart. I may mention something to him that next time he puts them in to try and keep that 8-foot rule.
Yeah.
I've seen boxes 3 feet off the bottom. And I know the guy wants to get it down to 2, but because of the digging or the soil or whatever, it's posing a challenge to him. I've seen many different things. I ask myself the question, is the man subject to hazardous ground movement that could entrap or immobilize? And if the answer to that is yes, I feel that I need to bring it up. But if it's not, maybe it's improperly, just a little short of being exactly right with the tabulated data, I don't make a big issue of it.
Right.
Wendell, I know that you are and have been involved in OSHA and the compliance and so forth, and even writing the standards. In this idea of nothing is really ever going to be perfectly shored, what is OSHA looking for when they come out to a job site, in terms of compliance, but also just in trench safety in general?
We made a note on that just a couple days ago, and it had good viewership. The top 5 citations, and even though it's special emphasis, the number of citations compared to the overall citation is really relatively small. There's no way the industry can make the plea that OSHA is targeting them. They're looking for things they can take a picture of, and there's not going to be a lot of discussion. So is there a shoring system or is there not? Is there people in it, and failure to take the guy out of a dangerous situation? Is there access and egress? Is the spoil pile correct? They're really looking for very simple things. Things that they can take a picture at, yeah. And they're not heavy-handed by any means. There are exceptions, but generally speaking, no, that would not be the case.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just turning it over to you.
Well, I just was going to say, these guys with OSHA have a tough job, because they have so many different standards they have to enforce. And this morning they're on a scaffolding project, and this afternoon they're on a trenching project, and they've got a bookshelf of regulations they have to enforce, and they work in pretty hostile environments. When you walk up on the job site and say, I'm with OSHA, people don't exactly roll out the red carpet. And so those guys I have a lot of respect. Those guys have a tough job. And Wendell is right on target. You're supposed to have a ladder every 25 feet. I can virtually guarantee you, if your ladder is 27 feet, you're not going to get a citation, unless something happens on that job site that causes that compliance officer to take out his magnifying glass and maybe get some help from his regional office. They're more big picture. But OSHA is the least of the concerns for a contractor, in my opinion, or a utility.
Exactly. And in some states, they've actually admitted to me that they just don't have time to get on construction sites. They're intimidated by the training that has been out there for the competent person. And trenching it's special emphasis, but it's not really targeted by many of the compliance officers. I've had them admit to me they're much more comfortable in plants, other facilities than they are on a construction site.
Wendell, how many trench safety classes do you think you've taught over the year? Competent person training classes.
I really wondered about that. I think David is one of the leaders in that through the NUCA programs over the years. We've taught a lot of compliance classes back in the 80s with Dr. Mickle and George Bradbury from Speed Shore. And then with our distributors, we did classes on the upcoming standard. And then we did work with NUCA, with NAXSA, but I've never really kept a record of that. But there's a number of people out there that are master trainers. David is one of them for NUCA. And so I give him a huge amount of credit there. We've participated in training trainers to some extent. And I know I've done maybe 2,000, 3,000, but I've not hit the big numbers like some of the others have. But I will say this, I am anxious to do more.
But
I do enjoy it.
Yeah, Wendell, though, is a pioneer in terms of when you look back in another 50 or 100 years, when someone writes the story of shoring and shielding industry in this country, Wendell's going to be probably on page 1 of the first chapter. Not only his experience, I mean, with the manufacturing and with the writing of the standards and training, and Wendell's had a huge influence. James, OSHA's not the big concern. If it is a gut-wrenching experience to have a serious injury or a fatality within your company or on your job site, and words cannot express the impact that has on the people in an organization. And so we certainly want to comply with all the OSHA standards, but and certainly we want to provide a safe workplace. That's the right thing to do. But the last thing any of us want in this industry is for there to be a serious injury or fatality. Words can't express what that's like. OSHA fine might be a lot of money, but it's small compared to the loss of life, potential loss of life. The good news is that you go through the right steps, the right shoring and shielding practices. It's not terribly difficult to provide a safe construction site.
Thank you, David Dow and Wendell Wood, for joining us on our NAXSA podcast, and look for the second half of our conversation with David and Wendell.